Why was she the only one still standing when everyone else sat down? The briefing room was silent, thick with tension and the hum of old ceiling fans. Around the table, every officer's face reflected the same mix of exhaustion and calculation. Maps were spread out, markers bleeding red over the sprawl of a city that had forgotten peace. And in the center of it all, Captain Lee Monroe, call sign Iron Hawk, stood like a ghost no one wanted to acknowledge. "Sit down, Captain," someone said. But she didn't. She just stared at the satellite map of Karim City, the city that had taken her brother 2 years ago, the city that refused to stop taking. Outside, the desert wind clawed at the canvas walls of the forward command tent. Inside, voices overlapped, intelligence reports, troop placements, evacuation routes, all the noise of strategy that never quite masked the smell of fear. Lee's jaw tightened. She had seen that look before, back in the simulator room years ago, the sideways glances, the whispered doubts, the unspoken belief that she was here because someone up high wanted a headline about progress. She'd earned her flight wings the hard way. Long nights, empty runways, sweat freezing on her hands before dawn. And yet, even now, even here, surrounded by men who'd flown less, fought less, lost less, she was the one they watched like a loaded gun they didn't trust. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Her logbook had already spoken louder than words ever could. Karim City, a crumbling capital in the Horn of Africa, where peacekeeping had turned into survival. On paper, it was a stabilization mission: protect aid convoys, secure radio towers, rebuild trust. But on the ground, trust was a corpse in the dirt, and aid convoys were target practice. By the summer of 1993, the city had split into fiefdoms of fear, each ruled by a name whispered like a curse, called Ferris, the warlord who turned starvation into strategy. His fighters used hunger as a weapon and chaos as cover. The Americans called it Operation Broken Lance. The mission was supposed to be simple: a 1-hour capture op, in, out, home for dinner. But nothing in Karim City ever stayed simple. Lee adjusted her gloves, stepping out into the afternoon heat. The tarmac shimmered like glass, the air thick enough to taste. Her A-10 Thunderbolt, the Warthog, waited in silence at the edge of the runway, its gray body streaked with dust, its twin engines glinting like watchful eyes. She rested her hand on the metal skin. Cold, familiar, alive. "Morning, Captain," one of the crew chiefs called, squinting under his helmet. She nodded, "Morning." They looked at her differently. Not unkindly, just uncertain. Like someone trying to figure out what courage looked like when it didn't fit their image of it. Under the right sleeve of her flight suit, she wore a small patch. Frayed, color almost gone. Her brother's. Staff Sergeant Adam Monroe, killed in Karim 2 years earlier when his convoy was ambushed just 10 miles east of where she now stood. Regulation said personal patches weren't allowed. But grief never asked permission. Inside the control tower, she checked the mission brief again. 2 Falcon-ass helicopters, Ranger teams on board, a small shadow unit from Omega Group following in the dark. Objective: intercept Ferris's lieutenants during a clandestine meet in the AA Machar district. She wasn't part of the assault. Just overwatch. Just eyes in the sky. The word "just" had always bothered her. From her vantage in the tower, she could see them, soldiers loading gear, tightening straps, joking too loudly to hide the tension. Major Cole Harris, leading the ground unit, slapped a ranger on the shoulder. "1 hour, boys, dinner on me." Lee smiled faintly. She'd heard that line before, too. 1 hour. It always starts with 1 hour. The rotor wash kicked up spirals of dust as the first bird lifted. Lee leaned forward, one hand braced against the glass. Falcon 61. Falcon 62. Both ascending clean, sunlight flashing off their frames. From her headset came a voice, young, confident, careless. Don't get lonely down there, Iron Hawk. She smirked, not my style. Her eyes stayed locked on the horizon, even as the last helicopter became a dot in the glare. The map before her was alive with light green pings for every moving unit, small digital heartbeats tracing across a dying city. The longer she watched, the more she realized how fragile those signals looked, each one just a blink away from silence. And then the first flicker. A green light vanished. She frowned. Control, I've lost telemetry on Falcon 61. Static, then through the crackle. We're hit, tail rotors gone. Mayday, mayday. The sound cut off. Outside, a column of smoke began to rise over the eastern quarter. Lee's stomach turned cold. Sector 9, a voice shouted in the tower. Crash confirmed, crew alive, they're surrounded. Orders flew like gunfire. Deploy ground convoy. Rangers en route. Patch all frequencies to command. Lee grabbed her mic. Eagle Nest to command, I can cover them. Requesting close air support authorization. The reply came back sharp. Denied, airspace is blacked out, you are not cleared. She hesitated, sir, they're pinned down. That's an order, Captain. We can't risk losing another aircraft. Her jaw clenched. Static filled the silence where courage usually lived. She looked out the tower window. The horizon glowed black. And somewhere beyond that smoke, 480 soldiers were dying one by one, while the people with the power to save them argued over policy. Lee stared at the small photograph taped beside her monitor, her brother, smiling in uniform beside a convoy truck. Her hand brushed over it gently. Then she whispered, then I'll clear myself. The headset hit the table. Boots pounded the metal stairs. Every step was a heartbeat, faster, heavier, final. Captain Monroe, someone yelled behind her, you don't have clearance. She didn't answer. Across the tarmac, the A-10 Thunderbolt shimmered like a mirage in the heat. Ground crews froze as she sprinted toward it. Ma'am, you can't. The engines coughed to life before the sentence ended. Cockpit lights flickered, the APU roared, gauges spiked to green. The tower frequency screamed in her ear. Iron Hawk, stand down, do you copy? She pressed the throttle forward. I copy, she said softly, but I'm not standing down. The engine screamed. Dust exploded behind the Warthog as it rolled forward. Mechanics dove for cover. The runway blurred into motion. Her hands didn't shake, her eyes didn't blink. The last thing she heard before takeoff was her name, shouted, desperate, meaningless, drowned beneath the roar of turbines. And then, for the first time that day, the base fell silent. The A-10 sliced through the sky, leaving a trail of dust and disbelief in its wake. Below, Kareem City stretched like a shattered jaw, rows of broken teeth and hollow eyes staring upward. Lee's radar screamed, her pulse steadied. Her world narrowed to crosshairs and coordinates. Hang on, she whispered into the mic, though no one could hear her. She dove. Wind howled through the seams. Buildings rose like jagged ghosts. The air stank of burned oil and cordite. And then she saw them, the trapped convoy, huddled behind burning trucks. The first shots from her cannon tore through the air, a thunderclap that split the city in half. 30 rounds stitched across the alley, tearing apart a technical truck rolling toward the crash site. The explosion painted the smoke orange. Holy hell, someone gasped over the radio, voice shaking with awe. That's Iron Hawk. Relief, disbelief, hope, all in one breath. Lee didn't reply. She just pulled up, rolled hard, and lined up for another run. Her radar wailed again, enemy anti-air locking on from a rooftop. She dumped flares, the sky flashing white behind her. Shrapnel pinged against her wing, warning lights flared red. Fuel leak, hydraulic pressure low. She glanced at the gauges and ignored them. "Not today," she whispered. Each pass was chaos and purpose fused into motion. Every burst of cannon fire bought a soldier one more breath, one more second to crawl towards survival. On the ground, medics shouted coordinates through the static. "We've got 2 more out, need cover south side." She answered them with thunder. Smoke filled her canopy. The city glowed beneath her like a dying star. And somewhere in that burning maze of concrete and courage, a soldier looked up, face streaked with soot, eyes catching the reflection of her gray wings overhead. He whispered something none of them would ever forget. "She came back for us." Lee didn't hear him, but maybe she didn't have to. Because sometimes, courage doesn't need an audience. It just answers the call when silence grows too heavy. The smoke was thicker now, curling around the skyline like the breath of a dying beast. Lee's hands were steady on the stick, though her heartbeat was. Each second she stayed up here was another second the rule book burned behind her, but that didn't matter anymore. Rules didn't breathe. The men down there did. "Falcon 61, do you copy?" "Static." She tried again. Nothing but the hiss of interference and the crackle of distant gunfire. Below her, the crash site was chaos. A downed helicopter split in half between 2 market walls, rotor blades bent like broken wings. Tiny figures darted in and out of the wreckage, trading fire from behind ruined stalls. She caught flashes of movement on rooftops, muzzle sparks, tracer lines, a dozen ambushes blooming at once. Lee leveled out, crosshairs trembling over the street. "Hang tight," she muttered, voice low, almost a prayer. The A-10 dipped, engine screaming. Her cannon barked, thunder rolling down narrow alleys. The rounds hit like hammer blows, scattering insurgents in clouds of dust and stone. Then she pulled up sharply, the G-forces crushing her chest, vision tunneling to gray before she caught breath again. The radio burst alive. "This is ground, Team Alpha, Falcon 61 crew secured, taking heavy fire from the south. We can't move." Lee banked right. "Copy, Alpha, mark your position with smoke." A streak of orange rose from the debris. She lined up the mark, whispered through clenched teeth, "I see you." The Avenger cannon roared once more. Walls collapsed, gunfire faded. Through the dust, men ran, carrying wounded, dragging gear, shouting into the static. Then faintly she heard it. Applause. It wasn't celebration. It was disbelief turned into sound. But the city didn't sleep, and mercy never came twice. A sharp tone screamed through her headset, "Radar lock." She jerked the stick left. A white streak passed behind her canopy. "Missile." She dumped flares, banked hard, dove low enough that laundry lines brushed the fuselage. The missile veered, exploded against a wall somewhere behind her. Shrapnel peppered the hull. Warning lights flared. "Hydraulics B minor," she murmured, half laughing at the understatement. "You're fine, girl, you're fine." Smoke trailed her now, a thin ribbon rising from the left wing. Still, she climbed again, scanning the city for any signal of friendly forces. The comms were chaos, voices overlapping, screaming coordinates, calling for medevac that wasn't coming. And through it all, one thought dug into her mind like a nail. I told them this would happen. I told them Kareem wasn't ready. She could still see her brother's grin from 2 years ago, standing beside his convoy truck before it rolled into the same city. "We'll be fine, Lee," he'd said. "They say it's low risk." She believed him because she wanted to. Now the echoes of that lie were written in fire below her. Back at base, alarms blared. On the command floor, officers shouted into radios. "She's in restricted airspace." "Who cleared her?" "Lock her transponder. She's ignoring commands." General Kane watched the chaos with arms folded, jaw tight. "Leave it," he said finally. A junior officer blinked. "Sir." If she's still up there, it's because she's keeping them alive. Let her finish. No one spoke after that. Lee circled again, lower this time. Every loop over the city gave her another angle, another glimpse into the hell they were trapped in. 480 soldiers pinned between burning markets, sniper nests, and a maze of concrete that had turned against them. Through the haze she spotted a flash of silver, a second smoke column far to the east. Different shape, different burn. Her breath caught. "Control, this is Iron Hawk," she called. "Confirm secondary fire zone, east quarter, possible second crash." Silence. She tried again. Static. The silence was its own answer. Her eyes narrowed, 2 crash sites. Her fuel gauge read 60%. Enough for 1 fight, maybe 2 if she was lucky. She didn't hesitate. "Not leaving anyone," she said to herself, flipping frequencies. Static then. "This is Falcon 64. We're down Sector 11. We're surrounded." Lee froze. It was real. The second bird was gone. "Copy 64, she said, voice firm. "Hold position, I'm inbound." "Ma'am, we can't hold much longer. Enemy closing from all sides." "Just hold," she whispered. "You're not alone." The A-10 banked east, slicing through smoke and fatting sunlight. The closer she got, the darker the sky became, fire reflecting off the underside of clouds like blood in water. Buildings loomed so near she could see curtains flutter through shattered windows. Tracer rounds streaked upward, white-hot, clawing at the night. She jinked, rolled, let the city whip past inches below. Her left wing bled smoke. The cockpit shook like a living thing trying to tear itself apart. "Come on, baby, stay with me." Then through the haze she saw it. Falcon 64. Down hard against a collapsed wall, tail snapped clean. Figures moving around it, militia, firing into the wreck. She flipped the master arm switch. The HUD flashed red. She locked the cannon. Pressed the trigger. The GAU-8 Avenger screamed. A metallic roar that silenced everything else. Concrete erupted, fighters scattered. The first pass broke their lines, the second erased them. Over comms, voices crackled, half sob, half laughter. "She found us, Iron Hawk, here. God bless her, she found us." Lee pulled up, banking hard to avoid the debris cloud. Her chest ached from the G-force, but her hands never left the controls. There was no time to breathe. The sun was dropping. Shadows stretched long over the ruins, and she could feel the city shifting beneath her, as if Kareem itself were alive, angry she dared to defy it. Her gauges blinked again. Fuel 55, ammo 40. Numbers didn't matter anymore. She came around for another run, but something caught her eye. A symbol painted on the side of a truck near the downed chopper, faded, red, half buried in soot. A hawk clutching a broken spear. Her throat closed. That was Delta 9's emblem. Her brother's unit. She hadn't seen that insignia since the day they'd buried an empty coffin. For a heartbeat she couldn't move. Then rage sharpened everything. She pressed her mic. "Cole, this is Iron Hawk. Mark your perimeter with smoke." The voice that answered was shocked, almost laughing. "Iron Hawk, no way, that's Monroe up there, they grounded you." "Not anymore," she said. Major Cole Harris glanced skyward through dust and disbelief. The warthog swept past overhead, its wings cutting through smoke like a blade. "She's really doing it," he muttered. "She's saving our asses." Lee dove again, cannon roaring. Each pass carved open an escape route, one street at a time. On the ground, medics sprinted through fire, dragging stretchers toward the orange smoke. Reese Ward, one of the combat medics, yelled into his headset, "We've got 26 wounded. 26 Iron Hawk." "You'll have 30 seconds of sky," she replied. "Move them." Cole yanked a pin, threw a smoke grenade. Orange flared bright. From above, Lee saw it bloom like a beacon of defiance. She lined up, throttle full. Coming in hot. The cannon's roar was continuous now, a single metallic scream that turned walls to dust and trucks to shrapnel. "Go, go, move," Cole shouted. Rangers sprinted through the smoke, carrying the wounded toward the west. For the first time in hours, they had open ground. Lee pulled up, canopy rattling from the heat wave. Below her, silence spread, enemy fire thinning, rooftops empty, only the steady hum of her engines filling the void. For a moment, even the city seemed to pause. Through the cracked glass she spotted movement, a figure waving a green panel amid the smoke. Cole, his sleeve torn, helmet dented but still standing. "Iron Hawk, you did it," his voice came over the radio. "Corridors open." Her HUD blinked, fuel 45, ammo 30, hydraulic pressure dropping. She exhaled slowly. "Keep moving west. Don't stop until you reach the convoy." "You heard her, boys," Cole shouted. "Let's get out of this graveyard." From above, Lee watched the survivors begin to move through the path she'd carved, a smoking corridor of broken steel and crushed stone. She touched the old patch beneath her sleeve, fabric rough against skin. "You'd have liked this one, Adam," she whispered. "Delta 9's coming home." Then she banked east again. The city still burned. Somewhere more men waited. And she wasn't leaving, not yet. By nightfall, Kareem looked like a furnace. Fires painted the skyline orange. The air was a storm of dust and ash. Lee's hands trembled on the throttle, part exhaustion, part adrenaline. Warning lights pulsed across the console like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Every few minutes a tracer would scrape past her canopy. She flew low, too low, chasing every shadow that threatened the people beneath her. On comms, panic rose again. "We're dry on ammo. We can't hold the line. Wounded everywhere." Lee steadied her voice. "Copy, this is Iron Hawk. You hold your line, I'll hold the sky." She didn't know where that calm came from. Maybe from Adam's voice echoing somewhere deep inside her. "You don't quit when people are counting on you." Her fuel gauge flashed 15%. "Return to base," command ordered. "That's an order, Captain." She flipped the switch, killing the channel. Silence returned. No more orders. No more permission. Just purpose. Below she saw them, small figures moving among the wrecks forming up the convoy. They were alive but exposed, open road, no cover, perfect kill zone. She dropped lower. Engines howled. Fighters scattered, terrified of the growl in the clouds. She pressed the trigger, unleashing the last of her rounds. The sound was deafening, a storm that swallowed every other noise. Through the static came a whisper that grew into a chant. "Iron Hawk still overhead." Then another voice repeated it. Then 10 more. Within minutes, the radios were alive with it. Hundreds of soldiers whispering the same words between breaths, between gunshots, between prayers. "Iron Hawk still overhead." Lee's vision blurred. She blinked hard, clearing sweat from her eyes. That chant, it wasn't for her. It was for them. Proof that somewhere above the fire, someone still cared enough to stay. She swung around for another run. Out of ammunition. Out of time. But they didn't know that. To the enemy, the growl in the sky still meant death. To her own, it meant hope. And so she kept flying. Because sometimes, being brave isn't about surviving the mission. It's about refusing to leave while someone still needs you. The night was eating the city. Smoke crawled up through shattered rooftops, turning the stars into fatting ghosts. Lee's A-10 moved through the darkness like a wounded predator. One engine coughing, lights dimmed, the canopy streaked with dust and bullet scars. She could barely see the ground now, just the rhythm of gunfire flashing like lightning beneath her. Every pass she made was closer, riskier, lower than the one before. Every pass left another scar on her aircraft and on her soul. She could hear it now, the chaos below, the shouts, the metallic clash of hopelessness. Somewhere inside that noise were the voices of 480 soldiers who still believed she'd keep her promise. She adjusted her headset. "Ground convoy, this is Iron Hawk. Status." Static, then Cole's voice, hoarse but alive. "We're moving west, 30 wounded loaded, another 30 inbound, but we're getting hammered north rooftops." "Copy." Lee pulled back the throttle. The engines whined in protest. Her entire body felt like a tuning fork, vibrating with tension. "You ever get the feeling," she murmured, "that the sky doesn't want you anymore?" She didn't expect an answer, and the sky didn't give one. At forward base Eagle Nest, the runway lights glowed dim through the haze. Inside the command tent, radio chatter poured in like rain. "Sir, she's still in the fight. Her fuel at critical. She's ignoring recall orders." General Marcus Kane stared at the tactical display, the tiny blue icon that refused to disappear. "She's covering 2 crash zones alone," a lieutenant said, voice tight with disbelief. Kane exhaled slowly. "Then you better hope she keeps ignoring me." No one argued. Back over Kareem, Lee dove again. Her target was a cluster of rooftops overlooking the convoy's escape route. She could see the flashes, machine guns, RPG tails, the muzzle flare of a sniper rifle trained on something she couldn't yet spot. "Let's end this." She leveled out, squeezed the trigger, nothing. A hollow click. The cannon was empty. Her stomach sank. She slammed a gloved hand against the console. Out of ammo, out of everything but stubbornness. "All right," she whispered, "let's make noise." She dropped altitude, throttling the engines to maximum. The A-10's roar filled the streets below, shaking windows, scattering fighters who didn't know she couldn't shoot anymore. On the convoy radios, someone shouted, "Iron Hawk still overhead." The chant began again. Lee smiled weakly. "Keep believing it," she murmured. Minutes stretched into an hour. Fuel 10%. Hydraulics failing. The cockpit temperature climbing past unbearable. Sweat trickled down her neck, pooling beneath her collar. Her breath came shallow and ragged inside the oxygen mask. Somewhere deep in her headset, command tried one last time. "Iron Hawk, this is Eagle Nest. You are red line across the board. Return to base immediately. That's an order." She closed her eyes. Her brother's voice echoed in the dark of her mind. "You don't leave while people are counting on you." Her thumb reached out and flipped the comm switch down. The channel went dead. Not yet. Below, the convoy crawled through the open road she'd carved, engines wheezing, tires grinding over debris. Headlights flickered through smoke, casting ghostly shapes on the ruined walls. Cole Harris leaned out of a moving Humvee, radio clutched tight. Stay tight, don't stop." His medic, Reese Ward, was kneeling over another wounded man in the back seat, hands slick with blood. He looked up through the roof hatch, saw a flash of gray wings above them. "She's still here," he whispered. "She's not leaving us." Lee circled once more. Her eyes burned. The desert horizon was a smudge of orange and black. For a moment she thought she saw dawn, but it was just another explosion in the distance. Then her radar blinked again, new contacts. North of the city, fast-moving, dozens. She zoomed the display. Convoy trucks, technicals, maybe 20, no 30. Headed straight for the corridor she'd opened. "Of course," she muttered, "they always come for the wounded." Her hand drifted to the throttle. Her gauge read 5% fuel. Not enough to fight, barely enough to fly. But she turned toward them anyway. The engine screamed as she climbed for altitude. The airframe rattled. A smell of burning oil filled the cockpit. "Come on, girl, not now, stay with me." Below, the enemy convoy broke into the open road, headlights slicing through the dark. She could see the heavy guns mounted on the beds, the silhouettes of men cheering, firing into the sky. They thought she was gone. They thought the sky was theirs again. Lee stared at the counter. One shell left. She almost laughed. One's all I need. She pitched the nose down, the horizon tilting violently. The G-forces pinned her back as gravity reached up to claim her. The A-10 dove, fast wild, the air howling through the cracked canopy. Her visor rattled, her chest ached, her heartbeat became the engine's rhythm. "Adam," she whispered, "I hope you're watching." She waited for the reticle to turn amber. Press the trigger. The cannon barked once, just once, and the round hit like a divine hammer. The lead truck erupted, its fuel tank igniting a chain reaction that leapt from vehicle to vehicle. The night exploded into daylight. Shock waves rippled through the city, windows shattered blocks away. Her jet shuddered violently, alarm screaming. She pulled up hard, fighting the stick with everything left in her. "Come on, come on." The A-10 clawed upward, wobbling, bleeding smoke from both wings. Through the cracked glass she saw the fire below, dozens of enemy trucks burning, the road transformed into an inferno. The convoy was clear. She bought them their exit. Down on the ground, Cole saw the blast wash over the horizon. He shielded his eyes. My God. Then the radio crackled. "She did it," a voice said. "The path's open." Cole grinned through soot and exhaustion. "Then move every damn one of them." Engines roared. Humvees pushed forward through the wreckage. Behind them, the city burned like Judgment Day. Up above, Lee tried to steady the jet. Her control stick felt heavy, sluggish. The warning panel was a Christmas tree of red lights. Fuel zero. Engines coughing, choking, dying. She was gliding now, powerless, the ground rising slowly to meet her. Through the haze she could see the faint glow of forward base, Eagle Nest far out in the desert. It looked impossibly small. Her breath came shallow, her voice a whisper. Almost there. The engines coughed one last time, then went silent. The world fell quiet. For the first time since the mission began, she could hear her own heartbeat. In the distance, the ground convoy reached open desert. Soldiers stumbled from vehicles, collapsing into the sand, the sky still glowing behind them. Cole lifted his radio. "All units through. Repeat, all units clear of sector." He hesitated. "Has anyone got eyes on Iron Hawk?" No answer. He tried again. "She's still up there. She's got to be." Reese looked toward the city. The glow was fading now, the fires dimming into embers. "She'll make it," he said quietly. "She has to." Lee adjusted what little control she had left. The A-10 drifted lower, sliding through the night like a ghost returning home. The desert stretched beneath her, empty, endless. She pulled the landing gear handle. One wheel locked, the other jammed halfway. "Good enough," she muttered. Her altimeter dropped 200 feet, 150. The runway lights flashed below, shimmering through heat haze. "Hold together," she whispered. "Just hold together." The wheels hit dirt first, then tarmac. Sparks sprayed beneath her. Metal screamed. The jet skidded, bounced, scraped along the runway, leaving a trail of smoke and fire until finally, it stopped. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then Lee exhaled a trembling breath. She was home. Ground crews raced toward the smoking A-10. No cheers, no words, just the stunned quiet of men watching a miracle they didn't think possible. The canopy hissed open. Lee pushed herself up, limbs shaking. The night air hit her face like water after drowning. General Kane approached slowly, hat tucked under one arm. "Captain Monroe," he said, voice unreadable. Lee straightened instinctively, trying to salute, but her arm wouldn't quite obey. "Aye, sir, aye." He raised his hand first. Saluted her. The gesture hit harder than any words. "You saved every one of them," he said softly. It wasn't pride in his tone, it was reverence. Lee's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, but the sound wouldn't come. Behind him, engines rumbled, the returning convoy. Headlights spilled across the tarmac. Medevac buses rolled to a halt, brakes hissing. Through the windows, wounded soldiers raised their hands, palms pressed to the glass in silent salute. The silence broke. One voice, then two, then dozens. A low, ragged cheer, rolling across the night like wind through dry grass. Lee's eyes burned, she didn't hide it. She looked out at them, faces pale, bandaged, alive. And for the first time since dawn, she let herself smile. "Courage doesn't wait for permission," she whispered. "It just answers the call." General Kane nodded once slowly. Somewhere behind them, the cheering grew louder. And Kareem City, for the first time in years, was quiet. Night came softly to the Arizona desert. Not with thunder, not with fire, but with silence, the kind that wraps around a person's thoughts and refuses to let go. Captain Lee Monroe sat on the edge of her bunk, boots unlaced, the hum of the air conditioner the only sound in the barracks. Outside her window, the horizon glowed faintly orange from the base perimeter lights. She hadn't flown in nearly a year. They called it recovery. She called it stillness, a word that sounded peaceful to most people, but to her felt like drowning in slow motion. She had traded the scream of turbines for the buzz of classroom projectors, the smell of jet fuel for whiteboard markers. The young pilots she trained called her ma'am, with a mix of fear and awe. She taught them precision, discipline, protocol, all the things she had broken. And when they asked about that mission, she always smiled politely and said the same thing. It wasn't bravery, it was necessity. Then she'd change the subject. But at night, when the lights went out and the quiet came back, she still heard it, the static of broken comms, the rising pitch of the GAU-8 cannon, and beneath it all, a single voice that had stopped calling 2 years before. "Lee will be fine." Adam's voice. Her brother. Forever 27. The nightmares didn't come every night, just often enough to keep her afraid of sleeping. Sometimes she was back in the cockpit, descending over Kareem City, fire blooming under her wings. Sometimes she was in the convoy wreck, trying to pull men out before the fuel ignited. And sometimes she was standing in a field of sand where her brother was supposed to be, his name written across the horizon, but every time she reached for him, the sky turned to smoke. She'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, the desert cold doing nothing to help. No one talked about PTSD on base. Not really. They called it operational fatigue, or combat carryover, as if giving it a polite name made it less of a ghost. Lee didn't talk about it either. She just started running. Every morning before dawn, before the cadets filled the field, she'd run until her lungs burned, until her muscles screamed, until the sound of her own heartbeat drowned out the echoes of gunfire in her memory. It wasn't therapy. It was penance. One morning, as the sun broke over the hangar roofs, she stopped mid-run, hands on her knees, chest heaving. The desert was silent, except for the wind rolling across the tarmac. She looked up and saw an, lifting off from the far runway, the engines howling as it climbed into the blue. The sound hit her like a memory, deep, raw, familiar. For a second, she closed her eyes. She could almost feel the vibration through her chest again, the moment before takeoff when everything inside her had gone perfectly still. She remembered the weight of the helmet, the way her call sign had sounded in her ear, Iron Hawk, cleared for combat airspace. She exhaled slowly. Not anymore, she whispered. The plane banked left, disappearing into the horizon. She stood there long after it was gone. Later that day, during flight simulation training, one of her cadets, a young lieutenant named Avery, raised a hesitant hand. "Ma'am." "Yes, Lieutenant. I wanted to ask about Kareem City." The room fell silent. Every other cadet stared, half in shock, half in curiosity. Lee turned to face him. His expression wasn't idolizing or naive. It was honest confusion. "What about it?" she asked. He shifted nervously. "What made you go back up there, alone?" She studied him for a moment. The question wasn't about orders or bravery, it was about fear. The same kind she'd seen in every young face before battle. "I looked at the map," she said finally, "and saw 480 blue dots blinking out one by one." She paused, and I realized no one else was coming. Avery nodded slowly, the answer sinking in deeper than he probably expected. When the class ended, Lee sat alone at her desk for a while, staring at the blank simulator screen. Her reflection looked older, the faint lines at the corners of her eyes carved by sleepless nights and sandstorms. But behind them, there was something she hadn't seen in a long time: stillness without guilt. That evening, she walked to the far end of the airfield where no one went, the fence line where the desert began again. She carried a small box tucked under her arm. Inside were two things: her brother's patch and the scorched piece of her A-10's cannon nose that the soldiers had sent her. She knelt down, dug a shallow space in the sand, and placed them both inside. Not to forget, but to let go. For a long while she just knelt there, the wind tugging at her flight jacket, the horizon glowing faintly gold. She whispered, "You can rest now, Adam." Then, after a pause, "So can I." A week later, Lee received an unexpected order. Reassignment, Forward Training Division, Air Combat Survival Program. Location, Djibouti. Back to the Horn of Africa. Back to the same region that had taken her brother. Back to the silence she tried to leave behind. She stared at the orders for a long time. Then she folded them neatly and packed her bag. Maybe healing wasn't about running from ghosts. Maybe it was about flying back through them one last time. Djibouti airbase smelled like heat and salt, ocean air mixing with diesel. When Lee stepped off the transport, she felt the old rhythm return beneath her feet. The noise, the tension, the way soldiers laughed too loudly to hide the nerves. Different faces, same war. The officers who greeted her looked surprised. "Ma'am, I didn't think they'd send you back out here." She smiled faintly. "Neither did I." Her role was simple: teach survival flight under fire. Train young pilots how to keep calm when the world went sideways. But in between the lessons, she began to feel something unexpected: purpose again. One evening, as the sun dropped into the Red Sea, she stood on the flight line watching trainees taxi out in their practice jets. The engines roared, and she felt the vibration through the ground, the sound of fear turning into control. Beside her, one of the instructors, Captain Mendes, lit a cigarette and said, "You miss it, don't you?" Lee didn't look away from the horizon. Every day. Then why not ask for reinstatement? Everyone knows you could have any post you want. She smiled softly, "Because I've already had my last flight." Mendes exhaled smoke into the wind, and it was enough. That night she couldn't sleep. She walked down to the beach at the edge of the base, where the tide hissed softly against the rocks. The air was heavy with salt and memory. She sat on the sand, pulled her dog tags out from under her shirt, and ran her thumb across them. They were scratched and dented, her own, and one more pair she always carried beside them. Adam's. She held them both in her palm and whispered, "You were right. The sky doesn't forget us." The stars above her shimmered faintly. And for a moment, she swore she heard engines in the distance, not real but remembered. her A-10 roaring across the night, leaving behind trails of smoke and salvation. She smiled through tears. The ache didn't vanish, but it stopped feeling like punishment. Months later, during a joint exercise, she stood beside the runway as her trainees returned from a mock combat sortie. One jet came in too hot, landing hard, sparks showering from the gear. Lee's chest seized for a moment, instincts firing. But the plane steadied, rolled to a stop. When the pilot climbed out, shaking, breathless, embarrassed, Lee walked straight to him. "Hey," she said quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You stayed in control, that's what matters." He looked up, eyes wide. "I thought I was gonna crash." She smiled faintly. "We all think that the first time. Then we learn that control isn't about fear disappearing, it's about flying anyway." He nodded slowly, and something shifted in his posture, the kind of shift that turns rookies into survivors. As he walked away, Lee looked back toward the hangar where her old aircraft had once stood. A part of her still belonged up there, and maybe always would. But another part had finally found peace down here, where courage meant teaching others to find their own. When night fell, she wrote in her flight log for the first time in months. Under mission summary, she didn't write coordinates or weather. Just 6 words. Still flying, just without the sky. She closed the book, leaned back, and listened to the hum of the desert. Somewhere miles above, another pilot was tracing her path through the stars, learning, surviving, believing. And Lee Monroe smiled, knowing that courage, once born, doesn't die. It just finds new wings. It began the same way it always did, with static. Lee was in the training hangar, running diagnostics with her cadets when the first transmission came through. The radio crackled, voices overlapping in half-words and broken code. "Mayday, Falcon 3, taking fire south of the ridge, requesting immediate support coordinates." The air in the room changed. Everyone froze. The comms officer turned, eyes wide. "Ma'am, it's a live feed, not an exercise." Lee moved closer, her hand steady though her pulse was. "Where it coming from?" "Southern border of Garma province, 30 clicks east of our airspace." She knew that name. Garma. Same range where Adam's convoy had gone dark 2 years ago. Her throat tightened. "Status." The officer hesitated. "They're pinned. Falcon 3 is hit, pilot ejecting. We've got 4 down personnel and no air cover within range." Lee looked toward the simulator screens where her cadets sat frozen in disbelief. The younger ones stared at her like the hero from their textbooks had suddenly stepped into their reality. She swallowed hard. "Get me ops." Minutes later, she was in the command center, the air thick with heat and urgency. Screens flickered with live drone feeds, a barren expanse of desert, smoke plumes curling up from burning wreckage. Voices overlapped in clipped military code. Enemy positions along the ridge. Blackout zone, no visual. Evac route compromised. The ops chief turned to her. "Captain Monroe, we're short on combat-ready pilots. Our nearest strike package is 80 miles out." Lee's gaze drifted to the live feed, tiny heat signatures darting between rocks. She knew that movement, cornered soldiers. Her voice came low, quiet, almost detached. "They won't last that long." "Ma'am, we can't authorize." "Authorization be damned," she whispered. She looked up. "What aircraft are mission capable?" "Only one in Hangar 4, ma'am. Training loadout only. No full armament." Her pulse steadied. Old bird, light payload, low chance of return. But she'd heard that before. By the time she reached Hangar 4, the sun was low, the heat mirage dancing across the runway. The A-10 stood there, paint chipped, dull gray, marked for training sorties, not combat ready, not meant for what she was about to do. Chief Daniels, older now, his beard streaked with white, turned as she entered. "I figured you'd come," he said quietly. Lee didn't waste time. How fast can you arm her? He sighed, fast enough if I don't ask why. Their eyes met, no words needed. The same unspoken rhythm from Kareem City: risk, resolve, silence. She climbed the ladder, hands tracing the metal skin like greeting an old friend. The smell hit her, oil, steel, memory. Her fingers paused over the painted call sign beneath the canopy. Iron Hawk. She exhaled. Guess we're not done after all. Inside the cockpit, the switches felt familiar, muscle memory returning with frightening ease. She strapped in, the seat creaking under her weight. The headset clicked on. The hum of power systems filled her ears, like a heartbeat returning to life. She hadn't realized until that moment how much she'd missed this sound. Control tower crackled. Captain Monroe, confirm authorization for takeoff. We're not seeing any command clearance. Lee, press transmit. Tower, this is Iron Hawk. A pause. You don't need clearance when people are dying. Silence followed. Then Daniel's voice came through, gravel and defiance. You're cleared, Iron Hawk. Godspeed. Engines roared, dust swirled. The A-10 began to roll. The first seconds of flight hit like a rebirth, the nose lifting, gravity slipping away, the sky opening up like an old wound she wasn't afraid to touch anymore. The desert stretched below her, endless and gold, fatting into the distant mountains where smoke still rose. She leveled out at 12,000 feet, heart sinking to the steady rhythm of turbines. The HUD blinked with minimal weapon systems, 2 Mavericks, limited ammo, no countermeasures. Not much, she murmured, but enough. Her headset crackled again. Iron Hawk, this is command. You are operating unauthorized. Return to base immediately. She closed her eyes. Not this again. Negative command, she said quietly. I'm already over the ridge. Static filled the line, then died. For a moment she was alone again, just her and the hum of the sky. The valley came into view. Smoke, debris, tracer fire streaking across the ridgeline. Her radar picked up friendly transponders 4, huddled near a wrecked Humvee. She could see them now, dots against the vast sand, flashes of gunfire closing in. Lee's hand tightened around the throttle. Hang on, she whispered. She rolled the aircraft low, diving beneath the cloud line, the world blurring past. The ground rose fast, jagged rock, dirt trails, muzzle flashes. She squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 thundered to life. The sound hit like thunder through her chest. Her old bird roared, brass shells raining into the sand, enemy positions erupting in smoke and dust. The soldiers on the ground scrambled, waving signal flares. Their comms came through her headset now, raw and panicked. Holy hell, Iron Hawk, is that? Get to cover, she barked. I've got you. She banked hard, engine straining, tracing another pass. Tracers climbed toward her, bright and angry. One clipped the wing, the frame shuddered. She gritted her teeth, adjusted trim, stayed level. Come on, girl, she muttered to the A-10. We've done worse. Her second run cleared the ridge. Enemy trucks went up in flame. The gunfire slowed, scattered. She could hear command now, frantic. Monroe, RTB immediately. You're taking damage. But Lee wasn't listening. Her voice softened, almost like a prayer. Just one more pass. As she lined up again, she caught movement, one of the soldiers dragging another toward the extraction zone. The downed pilot, probably. The evac chopper was inbound, dust kicking up on the horizon. Lee's chest eased. Almost home, she whispered. Then a missile-locked tone. Sharp, unmistakable. She jerked the stick right. The warning blared in her headset. Countermeasures, none. The missile streaked from the ridge, white trail slicing through blue. She cut throttle, rolled into a dive, every second stretching longer than time should allow. The missile passed barely, detonating behind her in a bloom of white heat. The shockwave slammed through the cockpit, alarms screaming. The right engine coughed, caught fire. She steadied her breath. Not yet. Smoke filled the canopy, the controls sluggish. The soldiers were clear now. She could see the evac bird touching down. She banked once more, giving them full cover. A last pass, the old vow. One last run. When the evac chopper lifted, Lee exhaled. Her wing was trailing fire, but her heart, for the first time in years, was calm. The radio clicked. Evac secure, all survivors aboard, Iron Hawk, do you copy? She smiled faintly, wiping soot from her cheek. Copy that. Returning to base. She looked out at the horizon, the same desert, the same sky. No, she said quietly, just circling a while. When she finally turned toward base, her right engine sputtered and died. The A-10 dropped altitude fast. Alarms flared again. She wrestled the stick, coaxing the bird to level out. Come on, she whispered, just a little farther. Below, endless sand. No road, no base, no safety, just the hum of wind. The left engine began to fail. Lee breathed deep, calm as the plane sank lower. The horizon burned gold in the distance. She keyed her mic. Tower, this is Iron Hawk. I'm coming in light and limping. A pause. Copy that, Iron Hawk. We've got eyes on you. Her lips curved. Tell Daniels I owe him another engine. The plane shuddered, skimming the desert floor. Her hand hovered over the eject handle, then stopped. She looked out the canopy, the desert stretching like memory itself. No fear, no regret. Just peace. And in that quiet, she heard a voice again, steady, proud, familiar. You did good, Lee. The A-10 touched down hard on the open sand, skidding, spinning, throwing up clouds of dust. Metal screamed, then went silent. Hours later, rescue teams reached the wreck. They found her alive, bruised, bleeding, but smiling. When they pulled her from the cockpit, she looked at the medic and whispered, "They're safe." All of them, he said. Her eyes closed. Good, then we're even. That night under the hospital tent's dim lights, Kane himself walked in. Older, grayer, the war written into his posture. He didn't salute. He just sat beside her bed, silent for a long while. Then he said, "You realize you just broke every regulation in the book again." Lee smiled weakly. "I'm consistent." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You're impossible." Her eyes flickered open. Maybe that's what keeps us human. He looked at her, then said, "They're calling it Iron Hawk's return." She laughed faintly. "They always need a name." Then quieter, "Just don't let them call it a miracle." Kane's expression softened. "No, this one's not a miracle, it's a promise kept." Lee closed her eyes again, the desert wind humming against the tent. For the first time since Kareem City, she felt light, not like someone who survived war, but someone who'd finally made peace with it. The desert was quiet again. Not the kind of quiet that comes before war, but the kind that stays after it's over. The wind moved soft lines across the sand, carrying dust and memory together in the same breath. Lee Monroe stood outside the field hospital at sunrise, one arm in a sling, her flight suit torn and stained with salt and oil. Her eyes were distant, tracing the sky where her A-10 had gone down 2 nights before. A single black plume still rose from the wreck somewhere beyond the ridge, thin, ghost-like, almost gentle now. She watched it the way a mother watches her child leave home for the last time. Behind her, the base was coming alive. Engines warming, men shouting, the daily churn of war continuing as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But for the soldiers she had saved, nothing was ordinary anymore. They came to see her before dawn, 4 of them, still bruised and bandaged, still limping from the crash. The youngest of them, barely 23, carried something in his hands. A jagged fragment of metal, sand-polished, painted roughly in black marker. "For Iron Hawks who came back." He didn't speak. He just offered it with trembling fingers. Lee looked at it for a long time before accepting it. The fragment was warm from his hands, rough and imperfect, the kind of relic that outlasts every metal ever made. She nodded. "Keep flying," she said softly. The soldier smiled through cracked lips. "Only if you teach us how." When they left, Lee turned the piece over in her hands again. The metal shimmered faintly under the rising sun, sharp, scarred, and beautiful, just like the truth. Later that morning, General Kane visited again. His uniform was pressed, his voice steady, but the look in his eyes wasn't military anymore, it was human. "They're calling this one the Garma Rescue," he said, standing by her bed. She smiled faintly. "They're running out of titles." He chuckled under his breath. "You broke protocol again, stole an aircraft again, defied command again." "Consistent," she murmured. He paused. "You understand what comes next." Lee nodded. "Grounding, maybe permanent this time." Kane nodded slowly. "And you're okay with that?" She thought for a long moment before answering. Her gaze drifted to the open tent flap, where sunlight spilled over the sand like gold dust. "Sir, I've spent years trying to earn my way back to the sky," she said. "And somehow I finally did. Not for glory, not for orders, just to make peace with it." Kane studied her, then said quietly, "Peace is a rare thing in this job. You've earned it." When he turned to leave, she stopped him. "Sir." He looked back. She smiled gently. "If they ask for my recommendation for the next Iron Hawk, tell them to find someone who doesn't want it." He nodded once, eyes soft, then left without another word. She spent the next few weeks recovering in silence. No cameras, no press, just the rhythmic sound of sand shifting outside her tent and the occasional crackle of distant engines. Her right arm healed slowly. The burns faded into thin lines that looked almost like flight paths across her skin. Each scar marked something more than pain, it marked proof. The pilots she trained came to visit often, sitting at her bedside, asking questions not about tactics or maneuvers, but about fear. How to face it. How to live with it after the smoke clears. Lee answered each question with quiet honesty. "You don't get rid of fear," she said. "You learn its shape, and when it comes back you look it in the eye and fly anyway." That became her lesson, not the kind found in manuals, but the kind that lingers in the heart long after the mission ends. When she was finally cleared to travel, Lee didn't go home right away. She requested one last stop, the coordinates of the crash site. It took a convoy and 3 hours through empty desert to get there. The A-10 lay half buried in the sand, torn apart but strangely peaceful, as if it had simply landed and decided to rest. The paint was scorched, the wings twisted, but the name beneath the canopy was still visible. Iron Hawk CAPT, Leah Monroe. She stood in the silence for a long time, wind brushing through her hair, the horizon shimmering with heat. Then she walked forward, touched the metal, and whispered, "You did your part." The desert answered with nothing, and that somehow was enough. She reached into her pocket and took out the fragment the soldier had given her. She placed it on the broken fuselage, like a gravestone for something that had never really died. When she turned away, her eyes were wet not with grief but gratitude. Months later, Lee returned to the States. Her discharge came quietly, tucked into a thin envelope like an afterthought. Honorably retired, medical recommendation approved. No ceremony, no speech. Just a single note in handwriting she recognized. "You don't need wings to keep flying, see." She smiled when she read it. Then she folded it carefully and slipped it into her logbook, next to the note from years ago that said, "You did the right thing." Civilian life came slow. The noise of jets was replaced by the hum of traffic, the smell of fuel by rain and soil. She settled in a small town in Arizona, far from the bases, far from the echoes of the radio that had once carried her life in every frequency. Her home was simple, a wooden porch, wind chimes, desert horizon in every direction. Sometimes at night, she'd sit outside with a cup of black coffee and stare at the stars, tracing the constellations by memory. When the wind was right, she could almost hear the faint hum of an engine far above. And sometimes she smiled, whispering, "Still flying." Years passed. The story of the Iron Hawk became legend, told in classrooms, documentaries, and military academies. Cadets memorized her maneuvers, her decision-making under pressure, her refusal to abandon those trapped below. But Lee never went to the ceremonies. She never gave speeches. She let others tell the story how they needed to, because she knew the truth didn't live in headlines. It lived in the sound of those engines, in the memory of a sky that had forgiven her, in the quiet faces of soldiers who'd made it home. One spring morning, she received a letter. The handwriting was young, sharp, slightly nervous. "Ma'am, my name is Lieutenant Avery. You trained me years ago at Luke. I wanted to tell you I was part of the rescue team in Garma, the one you saved. I'm flying now. And when things get bad up there, I remember what you said. Control isn't about losing fear. It's about flying anyway. It helps. Thank you." Lee read the letter twice before folding it carefully. Her eyes stayed on one sentence for a long time. "I'm flying now." She smiled, leaned back in her chair, and looked toward the sky. The horizon shimmered gold. That evening, the wind shifted again, soft and steady, carrying the sound of a jet passing somewhere high above the clouds. Lee listened. The noise faded slowly, leaving only silence and the whisper of her wind chimes. She reached for her old flight log one last time. The pages were weathered, stained by sand and oil and time. She turned to the final page, the one she'd left blank for years. And she wrote, "Final entry. I've learned that courage isn't loud. It doesn't always roar through the sky. Sometimes it whispers through the quiet, through loss, through love, through choices that no one will ever understand. And sometimes it's not about being remembered. It's about leaving something worth remembering." She paused, pen hovering, then added one last line beneath it, small, almost invisible. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." The sun dipped low behind the desert hills, painting the world in gold and red. Lee closed the book, placed it on the table beside her medal, and exhaled softly. The wind moved again, gentle, endless. And for a fleeting moment, as the last light touched her face, she could swear she heard engines far off in the distance. The sky calling her name one last time.